In our headlines on this Wednesday, November 26th, here in South Korea. South Korea's Nuri space rocket is ready for its fourth launch that is scheduled to take place fewer than 8 hours from now in Gyeonggi County. And President Lee Jae-myung returns home this morning, having ended his 4-nation tour of the Middle East and Africa aimed at promoting partnerships. Meanwhile, the ruling Democratic Party submits a special bill to facilitate Korea's investments into the U.S. market in return for lower tariffs on auto exports and more. We are counting down about 8 hours to the fourth launch of South Korea's domestically produced Nuri space rocket. And for the latest from the site of the planned launch, I have my colleague Park Konu standing by live. Konu, welcome back. Now, precisely 24 hours ago, Konu, you spoke of strong winds there. What's the weather like now? Is it suitable for a rocket launch into space?
Yes, Sunny, I can say that it's pretty suitable for the rocket to launch. The weather can be a major variable for rocket launches, but at this moment, conditions are generally fine. Unlike yesterday when we had strong winds and passing rain, although it's getting a bit colder, so we have to see. But for now, it's pretty suitable. And if the average wind speed reaches 15 meters per second, or if wind gusts exceed 21 meters per second, all operations will immediately be halted, as gusts could affect how the rocket is positioned, which would disrupt its planned flight trajectory. So we have to hope it doesn't go beyond the limit, as the second Nuri mission had a one-day postponement due to strong winds. And there are also temperature limits the vehicle must withstand, which are between -10 and 35 degrees Celsius. Fortunately, that's not a concern for this time of year in Gyeonggi. And as for the forecast, some rain accompanied by gusty winds is expected, but again, fortunately, this is likely to occur after the scheduled launch window at around 1 a.m., so it's unlikely to affect the mission.
Right, good to know, Konu. So how are the preparations for the planned launch proceeding then?
So at the moment, most procedures, remain on track. The installation of the Nuri rocket on the launch pad was done at around 11 a.m. this morning. So that's the same for connecting the rocket to the umbilical system, which supplies fuel and an oxidizer, along with additional checkups to ensure there are no blockages or leaks in the system. Also today, there will be a comprehensive inspection focusing mainly on the fueling system and electrical components, of course. The actual loading of fuel and oxidizer will begin 4 hours prior to liftoff. As of now, the estimated launch window is between 12:54 and 1:14 a.m. Thursday, and the exact launch time will be finalized at 8:15 p.m. after the Launch Management Committee finishes reviewing the weather conditions, the possibility of collision with space objects, and the overall readiness of the rocket, which will begin at 7:30 p.m. And there are also backup dates running through December 4th in case of any bad weather conditions. Alongside, safety measures are also taking place with police and military personnel on duty near the Space Center. 27 large security ships are also dispatched regarding the fact that this is the first nighttime launch. And security is known to be especially strengthened starting 2 hours prior to liftoff through 10 minutes after.
Well, now that the security is in place, hopefully the weather will be more accommodating in time for that launch. Meanwhile, Konu, what are some of the more notable aspects of this particular mission?
So first of all, this, as I mentioned, it will be the first nighttime launch, providing ideal conditions for the main satellite to observe natural light displays, or auroras, and that's in fact why the launch is held during that time, as it is the most suitable for the main satellite to reach the orbit for perfect aurora observation. And the mission's main satellite, along with 12 additional satellites up from the 7 carried in previous launch 2.5 years ago, is set to be deployed into orbit. The goal is to reach an altitude of 600 kilometers with an error range of about 6%, while the primary measure of success will be whether the main satellite reaches its designated orbit. The estimated flight time is a little over 21 minutes, and the Korea Aerospace Administration will announce the results about an hour and 20 minutes after liftoff. And as manufacturing of this fourth vehicle was led entirely by the private company Hanwha Aerospace, this can mark a major milestone in the transfer of technology and a broader shift toward a private sector-driven launch system. And so that's all I have for you now, and I'll get you updated later on in our later newscasts. Back to you, Sunny.
All right, Kono, thank you for the latest on Thursday's launch of South Korea's Nuri space rocket. Do keep us posted. Moving on then, President Lee Jae-myung landed at Seoul Air Base earlier on this Wednesday morning from Turkey, ending a 10-day four-nation tour of the Middle East and Africa. Our top office correspondent Song Yoo-jin walks us through the highlights of his latest diplomatic agenda.
A four-nation trip spanning 10 days. President Lee Jae-myung's first stop on his longest overseas trip yet was a state visit to the United Arab Emirates, South Korea's only special strategic partner in the Middle East.
아랍에미리트 연합이 아마 가장 큰 구체적 성과가 있는 것 같습니다. 거기는 사전에 비서실장이 특사로 가서 협업할 수 있는 분야들도 많이 정리했고 또 구체적 사업도 다 발굴을 했기 때문에.
Following his summit with UAE President Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the two countries issued a joint declaration to strengthen their partnership and signed 7 MOUs. What stands out the most is the promise of cooperation in AI and defense. South Korea will join the UAE's multi-billion-dollar Stargate project and co-establish hyperscale AI data centers. In defense, the two sides agreed to jointly develop, produce, and even export weapon systems, which the presidential office says could lead to more than $15 billion in orders for Korean firms. From the UAE, President Lee traveled to Egypt, a country with 30 years of diplomatic ties with Korea. Lee said expectations for the summit had initially been modest, but his talks with President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, which ran nearly twice the scheduled time, unveiled new opportunities.
카이로 공항을 확장할 계획인데 거기가 아마 한 3-4조 원 정도 들지 않겠냐 이렇게 얘기를 하고 그걸 한국 기업들이 좀 맡아서 확장하고 운영도 해주면 좋겠다.
The two leaders agreed to broaden cooperation in international peace, the economy, and defense. MOUs on education and cultural exchange were signed. During his lecture at Cairo University, President Lee unveiled his vision for the broader Middle East, the SHINE Initiative.
S는 스테빌리티, 안정을, H는 하모니, 조화를, I는 이노베이션, 혁신을, N은 네트워크를, E는 에듀케이션, 교육을 뜻합니다.
The trip's main event followed, the G20 summit in South Africa. Making his G20 debut, President Lee emphasized the need to make artificial intelligence globally accessible and the importance of restoring the multilateral trading system. Good news for South Korea was also made official.
G20 정상회의 출범 20년인 2028년 다시 의장직을 맡아 여정을 함께 이어가려 합니다.
On the sidelines, President Lee held his first bilateral talks with the leaders of France and Germany. Lee's final stop was Turkey, often called South Korea's brother nation bound by blood for its military contributions to the Korean War. Attention was on whether progress could be made on Korea's bid to join Turkey's Sinop nuclear power plant project. Presidents Lee and Recep Tayyip Erdogan agreed to deepen cooperation in defense, nuclear energy, and biohealth.
한국의 우수한 원전 기술과 안전 운영 역량이 튀르키예의 원전 개발에 실질적으로 기여할 수 있기를 바랍니다.
A joint statement was issued covering these areas, along with 3 MOUs on veterans affairs, nuclear energy, and road infrastructure. President Lee says his four-nation tour this time was about strengthening existing partnerships, uncovering new areas of cooperation, and laying a firmer diplomatic foundation. It remains to be seen how the agreements made during this trip will further expand South Korea's diplomacy, especially across the global south. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
On the international front, U.S. President Donald Trump is maintaining his optimism with regard to a peace plan for Ukraine in the near future, claiming that tangible advances in talks have been made. Now, his remarks stand in contrast to the cautious tone adopted by leaders in Europe. Our Lee Sing-jae has the latest.
U.S. President Donald Trump said Tuesday that a deal on a Ukraine-Russia peace plan is very close. Speaking at the White House during the annual Turkey pardoning ceremony on Tuesday, Trump showed clear frustration that he has not yet delivered on his election promise to end the war quickly but insisted progress is being made and said the two sides are getting very close to a deal.
I've also ended 8 wars in 9 months, and we're working on that final war. It's not easy, but I don't know. I think we're going to get there. I thought that one would have been gone quicker. We did 8. I thought that would have been an easier one, but I think we're making progress.
However, the reaction from Europe was far less hopeful. French President Emmanuel Macron said Tuesday that there is clearly no Russian willingness to agree to a ceasefire or engage seriously with the new, more Ukraine-friendly proposal. Macron delivered that message during a virtual meeting of the Coalition of the Willing group of Ukraine's European allies, co-chaired by UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Macron. He added that the coalition would maintain continued pressure on Moscow and reaffirmed that Europe will continue to support Ukraine with strength. While Europe voiced doubts, Turkey positioned itself once again as a mediator. Ankara says it's ready to host Ukraine-Russia talks once more. It said that negotiations could be organized in Istanbul and that Turkey is already in contact with both sides to prepare the process. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan also attended the Coalition of the Willing meeting, where he emphasized that Turkey will continue its diplomatic efforts to facilitate direct communication between Kyiv and Moscow in pursuit of a fair and lasting peace. As international pressure increases and diplomacy accelerates, the gap between American optimism and European caution remains wide, leaving the path to any settlement uncertain. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
North Korea may possess as many as 150 nuclear weapons, and this number may surge past 400 by the year 2040. This is according to an expert from the Korea Institute for Defense Analysis. Speaking at a forum earlier on this Wednesday, Director of Nuclear Security Research Division Lee Sang-gyu said that the regime may have up to 131 uranium-based weapons and up to 19 weapons based on plutonium. This is 2 to 3 times higher than earlier estimates from other organizations. He also projects that North Korea could build more than 380 uranium-based and some 40 plutonium-based weapons over the next 15 years. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's daughter Kim Ju-ae has reportedly appeared on the regime's state television on more than 600 days over the past 3 years. An AI-based analysis of related footage by Japanese daily The Nikkei showed that this year alone she appeared on screen on more than 24 days each month since her first public appearance in November 2022. While her total airtime is far less compared to that of her father, the number of days she appears is similar. Pundits in Japan believe this frequent exposure may be intended to hint at her status as a future successor. Back here in South Korea, the ruling Democratic Party has proposed a special bill to pave the path for South Korean investments into the American market in return for lower tariffs on auto exports and more. Our economic correspondent Kim Do-yeon reports.
The ruling Democratic Party has submitted a special bill designed to guarantee the investment pledges made to the United States, a procedural step required to lower tariffs on South Korean exports. Floor Leader Kim Byung-gi on Wednesday formally proposed the Special Act on Korea-U.S. Strategic Investment. The legislation serves as the binding mechanism to fulfill the bilateral MOU signed earlier this month regarding trade and investment. The submission of this bill was the prerequisite for tariff relief. Following the proposal, the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Resources has officially requested the U.S. government to retroactively apply the lower tariff rates. Consequently, duties on Korean automobiles and parts entering the U.S. are set to drop from 25% to 15%, effective from November 1st. The bill outlines the creation of a Korea-U.S. Strategic Investment Fund and a Strategic Investment Corporation. The fund will be financed through returns on foreign exchange reserves managed by the Bank of Korea and the issuance of government-guaranteed bonds. It is authorized to support up to $20 billion annually, specifically earmarked for U.S. investment projects and shipbuilding cooperation. The corporation is established as a temporary body with a maximum operation period of 20 years. The government characterizes this investment structure not as a concession but as a necessary shift in industrial strategy. Presiding over the economic ministers' meeting, Finance Minister Koo Yoon-chol stated that the Korean economy is at a turning point. He argued that the mandated U.S. investments should be utilized as a strategic opportunity for South Korean companies to actively lead global value chains rather than simply responding to protectionist trade barriers. To support this transition, the Deputy Prime Minister added that the government will simultaneously focus on domestic deregulation in autonomous driving and energy sectors to maintain technological competitiveness. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
In other news, South Korea's better than expected economic growth for the third quarter of this year reportedly ranks it third among major OECD members. Our Eun-jin explains.
South Korea's GDP growth in the third quarter ranked among the highest of the world's major economies. The Bank of Korea said Wednesday that preliminary data released by the OECD on Tuesday showed South Korea's third quarter growth at 1.16%, ranking third among 26 economies. Backing the signs of recovery were strong semiconductor exports and domestic demand. Topping the list was Israel with 2.967% growth, and just ahead of South Korea was Indonesia, ranking second at 1.216%. China posted 1.1% growth in the third quarter, which marks the first time in roughly 3 years that its growth rate fell behind South Korea on a quarterly basis. Japan's Nomura Securities drew attention, recently raising its growth outlook for South Korea to 2.3% for next year, higher than its earlier estimate, which was at 1.9%. The new outlook of 2.3% is higher than the 1.8% proposed by the government, the Korea Development Institute, and the International Monetary Fund. Nomura economist for South Korea, Park Jong-woo, said that as stock prices and housing prices rise simultaneously, the wealth effect will help revive consumption, adding that next year's growth rate will exceed the potential growth rate. Meanwhile, a BOK survey showed on Wednesday that business sentiment in South Korea rose to the highest level in more than a year in November, supported by an ongoing boom in the semiconductor industry and improving consumer sentiment. South Korea's consumer sentiment also rose to an 8-year high in November on the back of the country's tariff agreement with the United States and stronger than expected quarterly economic growth. The Composite Business Sentiment Index for all industries rose 1.5 points from October, while the Composite Consumer Sentiment Index climbed 2.6 points from October. Eun-jin, Arirang News.
In our interview segment today, Japan's top tourism official to South Korea has highlighted the importance of travel and personal encounters to forge broader diplomatic ties. Our foreign affairs correspondent Oh Soo-young met up with him.
Everyday travel is creating a new sense of normalcy in South Korea-Japan relations, with tourism and culture expanding as the two friendly neighbours work towards future-oriented ties. That's according to Yuichi Shimizu, Executive Director of Japan National Tourism Organization in Seoul.
I think the key point is that each country now exists as a familiar, everyday presence in the other. Every visitor forges their own memories, encounters, discoveries, and moments of surprise the closer they look. For every trip, there is that much emotion.
This year marks the 60th anniversary of Korea and Japan's normalization of diplomatic ties. The decades since have seen fluctuations in bilateral relations. During a period of heightened diplomatic tension in 2019, Korean travel to Japan fell by almost 26% to 5.6 million. But that trajectory is changing. Shuttle diplomacy resumes between government leaders and active travel between citizens. In just the first half of 2025, 4.8 million Koreans visited Japan, nearly half of Seoul's population.
For Korean visitors, travel to Japan has become something very familiar. It doesn't require particular effort. It's significant that people now consider Busan or Fukuoka for their trip the following week.
The demographic makeup of visitors has also broadened.
It's slightly early to call it a trend, but solo travelers. Visitors in their 20s and 30s are the core. But we also see families and those whose children finish schooling. It is encouraging to see such a wide range of age groups.
The volume of traffic from Japan to Korea has been comparatively smaller, which the executive director attributes to Japan's lower passport ownership rate. 1.2 million Japanese tourists came to Korea in the first quarter of this year, 98.5% of pre-pandemic levels. The increase was driven by individuals than group travellers, indicating sustained popularity of Korean pop culture. Shimizu suggested this also offers an opportunity for cultural collaboration to encourage two-way travel.
This is just my idea, but if Japan and Korea could create joint dramas or films, content that strengthens enthusiasm on both sides, I think that would be marvelous.
Japan has boosted practical support for visitors from Korea, including smoother entry procedures.
The recent priority entry lane for travelers between Japan and Korea was very well received. When it comes to expanding regional routes, travel agencies and local communities are putting in considerable effort. We help promote the appeal of these regions and drive demand.
Among them are smaller cities with unique regional charm, as Koreans increasingly seek immersive experiences.
There are many wonderful places Koreans have not yet visited. I'd like to introduce places without direct flight connections. Nagano Prefecture offers rich culture and nature. Matsumoto, in particular, has beautiful streets, bars, cafes, and the national treasure, Matsumoto Castle.
He emphasized the role of direct encounters in shaping perceptions going ahead. A survey this year found that over 1 in 2 Koreans believe bilateral ties grew stronger through culture and sports over the past 60 years, compared to 1 in 3 who cited improvements in diplomacy and security.
It is not Japan seen through the news, but what you see with your own eyes, experience for yourself, and where you interact with people, those personal memories that accumulate. I believe these are what truly improve our relations.
Making special moments ordinary, Shimizu says he hopes endless discoveries and personal encounters will continue to build familiarity and friendship between the two sides. 오수영, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. In Brazil on Tuesday, the country's Supreme Court ordered former President Jair Bolsonaro to begin serving a sentence of 27 years and 3 months for plotting a coup after losing the 2022 election. Justice Alexandra de Moraes ruled that the latest judgment is final with no appeals left. Bolsonaro, age 70, will continue to be held in federal police jail in Brasilia, where he has been detained since his home detention was terminated on Saturday after the former president was deemed a flight risk. He admitted to trying to remove his ankle monitor with a soldering iron. Bolsonaro was found guilty in September of leading a conspiracy to keep him in power following his election loss. Justices also said he was aware of plans to target the winning candidate, President Lula, and incited the 8th of January 2023 riots, which led to 1,500 arrests. He is barred from holding office until 2060. In India, flight operations were disrupted across Delhi and multiple cities after a massive volcanic ash plume from Ethiopia swept across the Red Sea and reached northern India, according to the India Meteorological Department on Tuesday. Air India cancelled 11 flights, while Indigo, Akasa Air, and KLM also reported cancellations, delays, or rerouting as regulators ordered airlines to strictly avoid affected airspace. The ash came from the Hale-Gubi volcano, which erupted Sunday after lying dormant for several thousand years, sending an ash column thousands of feet into the atmosphere. India says the ash cloud is not expected to have a major impact on air quality. In the U.S., a powerful tornado struck an area of Harris County outside the city of Houston on Monday, damaging more than 100 homes as a cold front pushed severe storms across the south. Images from NBC News showed houses in the neighborhood of Memorial Northwest with siding ripped away and debris scattered across streets. Officials said on Monday no deaths or serious injuries have been reported. About 28,000 customers in the Houston area lost power at the peak of the storm, though most service was restored by late Monday. In New York, auction house Christie's said on Tuesday it will auction the original 1976 partnership contract that created the Apple Computer Company, valuing it in the $2 to $4 million range. The three-page document signed by Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, and Ron Wayne set Apple's original stakes at 45%, 45%, and 10% respectively before Wayne sold his share for $800 days later. Christie's will offer the founding contract and Wayne's withdrawal agreement as a single lot at the January 23, 2026 sale. Chu Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
Rain and snow are forecast across the country tomorrow when freezing cold is expected on Friday. It will start to rain in most parts of the country tomorrow morning, but the rain will have stopped in most places by nightfall. The amount of rain expected is around 5 to 20 millimeters. Rain will turn into snow in mountainous areas with low temperatures. Tomorrow morning will start off cold at 5 degrees in Seoul, 3 degrees in Daejeon, Daegu, and Gyeongju. Daily highs will only top out at 9 degrees in Seoul and Chuncheon, 12 degrees in Daejeon and Gwangju, which are around the average temperatures for this time of year. In the meantime, around the Gohung area where the Nara Space Center is located, the weather will be favorable for Nuri to launch. No major disruptions regarding the weather are expected. Sub-zero temperatures are expected on Friday in Seoul, bringing a much sharper cold. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. As always, thank you for watching.